Super duper. Welcome everybody. Welcome to this little webinar about animal communication and all the myths around it, all the bullshit. Is it too early to swear for this webinar, Alexa, do you think? No. I want to really thank my friend Alexa Linton from Vancouver Island in Canada for kind of being the reason why we're having this little chat today. Because we're chatting not only with people here in Perth, Western Australia, it's such a beautiful day, I thought we would sit outside, but also chatting with people over in Canada that I guess we know through our kind of shared network, you know, through Alexa, who does amazing healing work over there. There's some cool people jumping online. So today I wanted to sit in this beautiful morning sunshine, this is Ruby, and have a little bit of a chat about the common myths around animal communication, because I find that with the work that I do, a lot of people believe some BS that is getting in the way of them really activating their natural God-given right to be able to listen and communicate with all these animal beings in our world. Oh, hi, Bridget. Bridget's in the background. So I'll introduce myself properly for those of you that don't know me. My name is Laura Bird. I run a business called One Spirit Animal Therapies, and for the last 16 years or so, we've been offering therapeutic services in animal healing, animal communication, and also, you know, those same services for humans, because we're all animals. And we've also been running education, so taking people that are animal enthusiasts through learning skill sets for their animals at home and right through to professional level. So the latest offering that I have, I guess, is this animal communication program, this animal communication certificate that excitingly for people in Australia and in Canada has actually just been recognised. So we're actually a recognised training provider with the IICT, and you know, we'll talk a little bit about that later, but it's just really exciting that the world is getting to a place now where not only people are learning to talk with their own animals and kind of connecting to those natural intuitive abilities, but also that the world is starting to recognize that this is a real thing and there is value in it, and it is it has benefits in animal, you know, the animal husbandry side of things, but also benefits from a personal development perspective when we start to really connect and listen to animals and nature in the way that in the modern world we have forgotten to largely. So I want to just really welcome everybody that's jumping online. Hi, Andrea. And we've got some people here that are part of Alexa's whole horse apprenticeship, which is really exciting. And some people that are in the current Animal Translator program that's running here in WA. So yeah, that's super exciting. I wanted to just start off by talking a little bit about the fact that there are lots of kind of preconceived or cultural like misinformation about the, you know, especially around the spiritual side of like what's going on with this animal communication thing. And because essentially my animal communication abilities were activated or remembered through, you know, obviously through animal work, but really it was like an opening up of my intuition, which the animals helped me with. I've always had a kind of a perspective on it that's been quite animal, quite free of like cultural ideas. So you'll notice as we go through that some of the new age ideas that are out there and some of the stuff that's kind of common in intuitive development, the animals challenge that a little bit, you know, and it's kind of cool actually, because I think that they're such a great source of wisdom on this topic, and they come at it so naturally. So, you know, that's essentially why we're calling it the Animal Translator program here, because I actually believe that we're actually translating really valuable information that's coming from the animal kingdom that is, you know, hugely relevant for everything that's going on in our lives on the planet at the moment. So both in the kind of microcosm of our families and our relationships with these little guys, but also on the macrocosm in relationship to the way that humans as a species interact with the natural world and interact with animals. So let's get into it, shall we? I want to also just invite you, before we get properly started, I want to invite anybody on the webinar at any stage, if you type any questions that you might have into the chat panel on the side there, you are so welcome to do that. I will try and keep one eye on that and you know, and answer any questions as they pop up. But also, if you've got a question that you would like to verbalize, what I will do is just pop your hand up. So there's a little button that you can put your hand up, and I can unmute you for a moment and we can have a little bit of a chat. So I'm really here to answer any questions that you guys have on the topic of animal communication. So I've got a few myths that I would like to bust, but I would love it if you guys have questions, if they're not answered already in the topics that we cover, for you to jump in there, and we'll try and leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. And Alexa, feel free to jump in at any stage if you think I'm missing something or you want to clarify anything as well. Bubby Joe's she's slipping down a little bit. I got to tweak her up again. Yeah. So one of the first myths that I want to bust is around this idea that, and you probably have already guessed that I feel this way about it, but one of the first myths I want to bust is that it's like a magical thing that only some people can do, that in some way only special people can talk to the animals, only if you are gifted, if you're kind of like touched in some magical way, that you can listen to the animals. I actually think that's one of the fundamental myths that I want to break. You know, not only do I think that this is something that is really, really primal and really, really deeply like ingrained in our brains as a survival skill, because there was a time where we didn't have, you know, amazing double-story houses to shelter in and electricity and running water. There were times when we as a species had to be much more connected to the natural world in order to survive. So actually, you know, our ability to really listen to what was happening in nature and listen to what was happening with the animals and read all those signs and signals was way, way more important, and we used it on a daily basis. So that's essentially what we're reactivating when we begin this intuitive journey of listening to the animals again. But also I have some evidence to back that up, and that really is that. So I'm getting Bubby Joe hair up my schnoz as I'm seeing she's molting a little bit in the sunshine. A lot of the people that I see now as clients that that come and have me talk to their animals and use my services actually are finding that the information that I provide for them. This is Bradley in the background here having a little chew on the fence. This is his little protest because he would like to be out in paddock at the moment. The information that I find I provide to my clients is often confirmation of something that they already knew or that they already were feeling very, very deeply and they didn't trust. So it's very rare these days that I provide information that's completely new. Often I provide evidence to back up something that the guardian or the owner of the animal already believed was happening, but they just didn't fully trust it because they didn't have the external validation. So often what is happening, there's rummaging around going on behind me. So often what is happening is that people are already very in tune with their animals and very deeply connected to the truth of what's going on. I mean, think if you guys even online here have a little bit of a think about the times where maybe you've taken your pet to the vet about something and you've just known there's something not right, and the response you've got is no, nothing's showing up on the test, it all seems normal. But in your heart of hearts, because of the connection that you have with your animals, you know that there's something not right, and so you keep investigating, and inevitably what happens is that at some point you realize that you were right, that there was something going on, that there was a reason why that animal wanted to see the vet or needed assistance. So this is something that is unbelievably common. You know, I actually think that at the moment the world is filled with you know, not just animal communicators, because we all have the potential for that, but people that are actually far more gifted at this skill than they are aware, because they're just not, you know, they're just not trusting it. They're not doing what it takes to create the validation for themselves, but actually they're already doing it. They're already in the process of doing it. And that is something that is so important to acknowledge about this process, is you are already doing it. You're just, what do they say, you're unconsciously competent. So you're not aware perhaps of all the times that you're receiving information. I recently had one of my clients, she'd contacted me because she was feeling really anxious. She'd made the decision to have quite radical surgery done on an older dog in order to save his eyesight. And he was older, so, you know, she was concerned, is this the right thing? You know, is this too invasive for him at this stage of his life? And she'd made the decision and booked the surgery, but started to feel really like, after she'd made the decision, which was very impulsive for her, she started to feel a lot of doubt and feel a bit odd about it. And she contacted me about it. And when I spoke to her dog, he was absolutely hilarious, because he said, well, yeah, like, she's unsure, but I want the surgery done. So I got her to do it. Like, I essentially like beamed it into her mind and got her to book it, because I don't want to lose my eyesight. I've got things to do. I've got places to be. And, you know, and this little dog had so much like verve and like excitement about life still. And he didn't want to get old and not have this surgery done. And so actually she had been incredibly in tune with him and incredibly connected to what was happening. But then, of course, after the decision was made and he was no longer projecting his ideas into her mind, she started to worry about it and think she was doing the wrong thing. But in actual fact, she completely honored his decision. So often we find ourselves as animal owners doing things or responding to intuitive information that comes from the animals without giving it a second thought. We are unaware that actually we are picking up on and responding to and acting out the requests of our animals, and that we're incredibly in tune with that. It's one of the ways that animals train us. Cats especially are just brilliant at this and getting us to do this stuff for us. And then we find ourselves doing it and wondering why. And it's actually because our ability to listen is better than we think it is. So, you know, one of the things that I'm really kind of excited about is then what happens when we start to become aware of that and we start to utilize the information that we're already getting, understand the process, and bring our unconscious competence of this kind of natural phenomenon and make it conscious. So we actually begin to consciously engage in that process. So first myth busted is that only special people can talk to the animals, and you have to have some special gift. In actual fact, you already have the gift. It is hardwired into your brain. It is part of your hardware. It's just a part of your hardware that maybe you don't use every day. And even when you do use it, you might not be aware of yourself using it. So therefore, it becomes difficult to build on. So the next little myth that I would love to bust for you, and this is actually really like a funny one, because when people find out I'm an animal communicator, often the very first thing that they ask me is, well, if you're an animal communicator, can you please tell my dog to stop barking when the postman comes? Or can you please tell my dog to stop digging holes in the garden? God, Bubby Joe's gone really floppy here. She's just like relaxing right down. I might even just see if I can. Yeah, you're getting tired, aren't you? I'm just going to, there we go. Yeah, so get your little pretty little face in there. So that's one of the main requests essentially I get is, can you tell my animal blah, 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 blah. And this is almost my pet peeve about animal communication, is that people think that animal communication gives us the ability to tell an animal more clearly what we want. And actually, in a lot of ways, it's the opposite of what it is. It's an act of listening. So the information that animals receive from us is often quite clear, but animal communication is not mind control. They're actually better at this intuitive communication thing than we are. So they get what we want. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do it. So, you know, them being cooperative and acting a certain way is largely built on relationship and trust. And so often when an animal is expressing a behavior that we think is undesirable, it's actually coming from a place of them trying to communicate with us and us not listening. So this whole thing of me as an animal communicator coming in and telling them to stop doing the behavior is almost impossible. What is missing in that step is actually listening to what it is that the animal is trying to communicate with that behavior, and from there we start to see the shift in behavior. So often I do see the animals stop doing a certain undesirable behavior. Years ago, and this is a little example that I love to remember because it's so beautiful, because actually I didn't have to do very much, and the animals' guardians did a huge amount of the communication work themselves, but they had just missed the vital step of listening to the animal. So this was actually even before I was before I'd kind of started doing professional animal communication work. A friend of mine that I used to travel to work with on the train said to me, look, my old dog, you know, she's such a good dog, but she's recently started snapping at people and like being a bit like showing aggressive behavior, and it's very out of character for her. And I'm wondering if you can communicate with her and, you know, find out what's going on, because we'd really love to stop this behavior. So when I tuned into her and listened, what was actually happening was that she was feeling very afraid and very, very insecure. She showed me the whole family unit feeling unstable, and that she was really uncertain of her place in it. And it was really frightening her and making her feel defensive. You know, it was making her snappy. And when I shared that with my friend, she said, oh, actually, we have been thinking about getting another dog because she's such a good old dog, and we would love to get a puppy to learn from her so that she can pass on all of her wisdom. And I said, it's like she's very uncertain about what that means. And they'd been talking about it, but obviously they hadn't been talking to her about it. So they went home, and on my advice, her husband thought she was a little crazy. They had a family meeting with the dog. So they actually, all of them sat down, the whole family and the dog, and had a conversation about how this new puppy would be introduced. My water trough's just turned on in the background. It's on a timer. I'm just going to flick it off so that the sound doesn't interrupt. So, Bubby Joe, you're going to have to hop down for a second, my love. I should have thought to do that before. Oh dear. Here we go. Here we go, Dan. You're all right. Here we go. Come here, puppy. You want to come back again? Ah, brilliant. Okay. Sorry about that. All the farm noises in the background. It's okay. Bubby Joe actually got up for a little walk around. So, where was I? We were talking about a little story about the dog. So, what they actually did after this family meeting was they let like a couple of days go by, and what they noticed was that immediately the dog's behavior had shifted. She was a lot less anxious. The aggressive behavior had entirely stopped, and she was feeling a lot calmer. So they decided that they would actually get a puppy and bring the puppy home, and it all went exceptionally well. They all got along really, really well. And that was just one example of not listening to what was the core of the dysfunctional behavior. So listening, and rather than just trying to dictate, me as an animal communicator coming in and saying you must stop this behavior, but to actually listen. And then the family was able to, without any animal communication skills, they were actually totally able to talk with the animal, communicate clearly what it was that they were wanting to do, and the behavior entirely went away. So animal communication is not mind control. It is not the ability to make the animal do what you want them to do. What it actually is it's the ability to listen to where is that behavior coming from? What is the animal trying to communicate to me that I'm not hearing? And when I can hear that and honor it, then what influence does that have? How does that change the behavior patterns that are presenting? So that's another myth busted, I guess, is that is not mind control in any way, shape or form. Just checking in, no questions so far. Super duper. Little Bridget's in the background there, eating my passion fruit vine. Yeah. The light is changing a little bit. You're going to all get a really nice taste of the changing weather and the changing light in the morning here in Serpentine, Western Australia. So there's the couple of other little things that are common myths that come up around this like animal communication thing. And one of those is that I don't know whether you guys have maybe heard it, but we talk a lot, especially when we're trying to send information to animals, that animals communicate in pictures, that they don't use words. And so when we're trying to clearly formulate a message perhaps that we send an animal, so like this family sitting down having the family meeting, did they need to, in order to do that, send that information in pictures for the animal to receive it clearly? So I'm going to bust the myth of animals only communicate in pictures. It's actually not true. And that doesn't mean that animals know words the way that we as human beings use words or know language. But what I share with you now will hopefully straighten that out a little bit. So I've been different places in the world and spoken to animals in places where I'm sure the animals don't speak English, and the messages that I have received have come at times in words, at times they've come in pictures. It's kind of like a thing that happens, and I don't know exactly how it works, but my best guess is that when energy is translated between two species, it can be translated in a variety of different ways. So all of us have certain strengths around the way we communicate. We as human beings are actually highly visual beings. So the eyes are in the front of our head. We have, vision is one of our strongest senses. Whereas let's just compare that with dogs, perhaps, where we know that the rods and cones in their eyes are different to ours. So they don't see the world as we do. They don't see the world in color the way we do, but their sense of smell, and they're like Jacobson's organ in their nose, and where their nose connects to their brain that reads and interprets smell, is vastly superior to ours. So we know that dogs can sniff out drugs at the airport. We know that dogs can detect minor chemical changes in a body when someone's about to have a sugar high or low, that dogs can detect cancer. Dogs can tell if you're pregnant. Dogs can tell if you're about to have an epileptic seizure. So their sense of smell is so advanced to ours, but we don't have that sense of smell. So when an animal is trying to communicate with us, they're going to have stronger senses in one area and we're going to have stronger senses in another. So how do we fully understand what's going on? It gets translated. It gets translated into something that our brain, which is essentially a data bank of information, can translate and understand. So perhaps, and I've done this at times where I've been speaking with a dog and they've been showing me something that they're smelling, and it's like I know it's smell because there's certain steps that I take to kind of go, this is like, I'm now checking in with what is the dog smelling, and I might breathe in through my nose to see what the dog is smelling. But actually, when my brain gets that information, it may see it as pictures because my sense of sight is stronger than my sense of smell. So for me, it gets translated into pictures. In this same way, sometimes I've been talking to an animal, say like I was on the beach in Thailand and I was talking to a stray dog, and this dog told me things in English about things that were going on with their immune system that that there's no way this dog would know. But there was a file in the filing cabinet of my brain that was the closest translation for that energy, and that's what it showed me. So even if animals have a strong visual sense, and even if animals' brains don't work the way that ours do, and their primary sense is maybe visual, or that they don't think about the world linguistically or in words, that doesn't necessarily mean Rue's coming back over. That doesn't necessarily mean that we cannot pick up the information verbally, because our brain will translate the energy and will show us something that is most like that thing. So we often hear that things get lost in translation, and that is true. Things do get lost in translation. This is a bit of an art and not an exact science. And even culturally, between the species, we perceive things differently. So things are going to be interpreted a little bit differently. But there will be a reference point in your brain that is most like that thing. So the symbolic information, the energy will find the symbolic thing that is closest to. And this is where I think as human beings, when we are trying to clearly communicate with the animals and share very powerfully what it is that our intention is, or what it is that we want to share, it's so important that we use our words if those are the most clear and powerful thing for us. Because when we are clear about what we're sharing, the animals will respond to it. I've got a new horse at the moment, and he is just cracking me up because he's figuring out the property and where to go and how to do things. And, you know, there's like little areas where to come into the yards, it's a bit like a maze. And what I find is if I just say to him very clearly, you need to take 3 steps back and go around the gate behind you, all of a sudden he's doing it. And it's not because his grasp of the English language is fantastic. It's because when I speak those words, there is a clarity of energy in me. And I know that the translation, whatever it's translating to at his end, is clear. And the same is true when we as human beings listen to the animals. Whatever their intention is to communicate will get translated at this end here in a way that is clearest. So I don't know that animals speak our language. I don't know that, you know, in fact, my certainty is that they don't. Certainly some animals have got quite an amazing grasp on verbal cues and things like that. And, you know, it's been shown that dogs can learn however many words it is, you know. So there is that, definitely. But the complexity of communication and even their understanding of those things, I am sure is enhanced by the clarity that we as human beings have when we use those words. And the same thing occurs when we listen to them. We may translate information in a way that is outside of their spectrum of understanding or the way their brain works and interprets information, but you know, that's why sometimes a song will pop into your head. You know, you'll be doing an animal communication session and a song will pop into your head, and it's because there's something about that song or the lyrics of that song or the sentiment of that song that is the deepest, most relevant, most direct translation of whatever it is the animal would like to share. So it's something that we see happen again and again. So, you know, yes, animals are internal representations around the way that they perceive the world, their strongest senses, the way that they interpret things is different to ours. But often as animal communicators, what we find is that we get the direct translation in a way that matches up with our internal representations and the memories that we have. I have just like one other little example of that is popping into my mind now. Sometimes when we talk to animals in this way, something will happen where we maybe get a memory. So a little while ago on my little Facebook group, someone shared a photo of an animal, and the question was, you know, what has happened with this animal? And it was a little dog. The dog looked quite different to a dog that I'd had in the past. This was like a little Staffy cross, and I had a Whippet in the past, but it was bizarre because I had this very overwhelming memory of what had happened with him. And he had quite an unfortunate end. He was hit by a car. And it was, you know, even I, after 15, 16 years of doing this, was like, oh, that's weird. I've just had this memory pop into my head. That can't be relevant because that's not this, we've got playing in the water trough, because we've got, because that's not, you know, that's my memory and it's got nothing to do with this dog. Well, as it turned out, this dog had also been hit by a car. So the memory that popped up for me, even though like my humanness was like, oh, that's just me having a random thought, that's about me and not about the animal, it actually was both. It was a reason that memory popped in. So often, you know, I'm not even going to say often, always, every time we speak with animals or we listen to what's happening with the animals, are you going to destroy my frangipani rove? Yeah. Yes, he is. He's going to eat the flower buds off there. So when we talk to animals, we are going to get information because it's rifling through the data bank in our brain to translate that. We're going to get information that is relevant to us, that it's not just 100% the animal, that it's us as well. So, you know, this idea that we do not see the world clearly as it is ever, but we see the world as we are, is something that is especially true when we begin to listen to the animals, because that intuitive process, the things it connects us with, the memories that pop up, the emotions that come up within us even, are often relevant to us as well as to the animals. And that's, I guess, another like really vital part of this process, is that in a way, whenever we encounter anyone in our lives, we experience a kind of healing. We're looking in the mirror around an aspect of ourselves, and because of the way that energy translates in this sense, especially between species, where, you know, like it really just gets to the core of what is the energy here that exists, what is the sameness, what is the most direct translation that's possible between us. We get into a place where, as the communicator, you are looking at some of your own stuff inevitably, always. So you know, and that's like one of the next week when I run the webinar around how to improve your animal communication superpowers, you're going to see that there's some really important steps around acknowledging that and becoming aware of it. And what do you do with that, especially when the memory perhaps that it pulls up is an emotional one, like it was for me with the memory of my dog dying, being hit by the car, because the same thing had happened to this other dog. So if you want to kind of like get a little bit more into that as well, next week we've got the Australian flies present here as well on call. If you want to look at that, we'll talk about that a little bit more in next week's webinar about improving your animal communication superpowers, because kind of getting over that little hump is something that is going to be massive for you in terms of expanding what you're doing. Alrighty, so myth busted that animals only communicate in pictures. The energy essentially will be translated between species in whatever way is best. And really what happens at the receiving end is you getting the information in the way that makes the most sense to you or is the most relevant. Now that can be confusing as well, and that's again something we'll talk about in next week's webinar. Is a lot of the time we get information here that's highly symbolic and we go, what does it mean? I don't understand what it means. You know, I'm seeing this color, or I'm seeing this shape, or I'm seeing, and sometimes that is the most direct kind of translation of the energy, because we're talking about something that maybe doesn't have a word or something specific. It's a concept that is a little more symbolic rather than specific and literal. So we'll talk about that a little bit in next week's webinar as well, because that's often, especially when you get started, that's often one of the things that will start to happen is, oh, Bradley. Hopefully the noise of that is not too distracting. How's it going in the noise department there, Alexa, with Bradley splashing in the water trough?
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, no worries.
It's like a little bit of feng shui, like water magic in the background.
Totally.
Yeah, he's having a really lovely time splashing around.
Yes.
And Flirt's lined up behind him waiting for a drink, but Bradley's not done yet. Like he's still in there.
Oh.
So one of the other myths that I'd love to chat with you guys about today is, you know, especially when it comes to any intuitive process, we often as human beings get incredibly focused on this magical opening of the third eye. Like, I need to open my third eye. I need to, like, well, something's got to happen here. Like, I just need to, like, open that third eye. And what the animals have really shown me is it's not so much about the opening of the third eye as it is about the engaging and learning to listen to and trust our other kind of deeper, more primal energy centers. So yes, the third eye is part of it, but the third eye is very, very close to the brain. And as human beings, our brain is often overactive. It likes to actually interfere with our animal processes and our natural processes. It overrides them, and it will often create a lot of like chatter that gets in the way of the development of the listening and trusting process around this intuition. So in my first animal communication module, I talk a lot about the different primal brains. So as human beings, one of our kind of features as a species is this like amazing brain development that we have, which is a wonderful source of our intelligence, but it's kind of also our kryptonite, because we tend to want to apply our brain to a lot of things that the brain is actually not useful for and actually becomes sabotaging around. So our intuition, even if we do receive third eye information, it's all magical and spiritual and wonderful and visions and all of that stuff, what actually we really need to do is trust our gut. So our gut is an overlooked source of intuition. We talk about it a lot. When people have intuition, they will often say, I just listen to my gut. I just trust my gut. I have a gut feeling about this. And so we've got multiple different brains in our body. In fact, our whole body is a brain. We've got this wonderful computer up here that's exceptionally complex and advanced, and a little bit difficult to use positively sometimes. We've got our heart brain. So you guys will know your heart brain because you often, when you're making a decision in life, you'll say, my head says to do this, but my heart says to do this. So your heart brain is the one that comes in when your consciousness is here, when you're not up here thinking, but you're here feeling. Your gut is the one that gives you the gut feelings about things. Like, it gives you very strong yeses and nos. And if it doesn't give you strong yeses and nos, it's because you've actually stopped listening to it. It's a little bit like the horses here in the background splashing around, and the water's making me think of the thirst reflex. So we have this wonderful thing in our bodies that tells us when we are thirsty. It's there to keep us safe, to keep us alive, to stop us from getting dehydrated. But when we don't listen to it, it's a little bit like an alarm in the background that's always going that we tune out to. So it's just going wah, wah, wah all the time in the background, and we stop listening to it because it's just background noise. It's a little bit like if you've got a neighbor whose car alarm keeps going off up the road, and maybe the first time it goes off, you run out and make sure nobody's pinching the car, and you go, oh, wonder whose car it is. And after a while, if it goes off every day, 3 times a day, then you just tune it out. It just becomes background noise. It doesn't set off the internal alarm anymore. It doesn't make you go and check, because you just figure, hey, it's just the car alarm going off. So our thirst reflex does that as well when we don't drink enough water. Eventually, after a while, we think we're not thirsty. Sometimes we'll even think we're hungry and we'll go and eat something rather than have a drink of water. So our gut, our internal intuition alarm, our internal like yes and no is the same. If we don't listen to the those internal signals, those internal feelings in our gut about things, and we don't do something when we feel them, essentially we dishonor ourselves and we stop being able to tell when our gut is talking to us or not. So one of the most powerful things that you can do as an animal communicator is to begin to re-establish a bond of trust with your gut feeling. And your gut feeling will often be impulsive. It will be quite instant. It'll often be one of the first things you feel when you are listening to an animal. And it will be the thing that the brain overrides. So it'll go, no, that was rubbish. That can't be right. And I've got one of my most favorite stories that I tell about a little dog that showed me a very clear image. The very first thing I saw when I connected with her was the ocean, because a question had been posed, where did this dog come from? And I saw the ocean. And it was an instant gut. It was like just a really strong gut feeling, and I was in the ocean. It was like the ocean was all around me. And I overrode it with my brain because I went, well, that doesn't make sense. The dog's not going to come out of the ocean, is she? And so then I began to get other information about, a kennel, chain mesh, concrete, the steel metal piping, the gates. And when we shared the information, this was in a circle that my friend was holding around animal communication. When we shared the information, I didn't trust my gut. I left out the piece about the ocean. And after everyone had shared, the owner, nobody had mentioned the ocean. I was the only person that got that piece of information. And the owner of this dog shared the story that she had come from kennels and she was very shut down, and she didn't, it took her a long time to create connections and bonds. And then one day they took her to the beach and she went swimming in the ocean. And when she came out of the ocean, she was completely transformed. So she had actually let go of a lot of that guardedness, a lot of the shell, the defensiveness and the crust and the protection, and her personality had emerged. She had learnt to trust. She'd let go of something, and her true self shone out. So my answer to the answer that I got to the question of, where did this dog come from? She absolutely came out of the ocean. She was born out of the ocean, but I didn't trust my gut. I didn't honor that. And as a result, I overrode it. And I got some other stuff and that was okay. But it would have been a magical moment for me had I trusted myself enough, had I trusted my gut enough to say something that seemed ridiculous, but was truer than anything else that I could have picked up. So this whole idea of the third eye being the most important part of your intuitive process is complete bullshit. The most important part of your intuitive process is to trust your gut, to be okay to take action, to speak the words, to actually do something that responds to your gut feelings, so that your relationship, this connection to your gut, the trust, the friendship, the bond is strong in such a way that when you talk about animal communicate, when you start to share messages that you're getting, that you really know and trust that the information that you're getting has value, even if it doesn't make sense yet. So don't worry so much about your third eye in this process. Don't worry so much about that side of the communication process, about being all spiritually open and up here. Your gut is like the most important part. And so often, this part of our brain, this part of our awareness, all of this is a very human space to be in. When we get into the heart and we get into our empathic connection with the animals, we start to resonate more closely with what the animals want to share with us. When we tune into our gut and go down into our gut space and listen to those things, we start to get into really deeply instinctual stuff, which gets us very, very much on the same frequency as animals. And the other thing that, that we're not kind of talking about commonly. Oh, Bradley's making really cute little patterns with his nose in the water, the other kind of brain that I haven't spoken about yet in this webinar, but I'm starting to really talk about in our classes. It's not a common thing that we talk about, but I actually believe we also have a reproductive brain, and that is the part of us that gets the tingles of excitement about things, and our reproductive brain also knows things. So it's actually our heart brain, our gut brain, and our reproductive brain, the tingle of excitement that gives us a yes or makes us feel passionate about something, that those centers of our being and our awareness, those centers of our consciousness, are way more important to activate than our third eye. Our third eye is brilliant. It's very close to our brain, however, and our animal selves are they're further down in here. So if you really want to tune into, trust what the animals are trying to teach us, and this is why I'm so grateful to what that little dog taught me that day, was it really was not a lesson about my visions. It was a lesson about how it doesn't matter what visions you have, if you don't trust the internal yeses that come from deep down in your being, your effectiveness as an animal communicator is always going to be a little bit limited. So it's such a deep and important part of the process, and especially in the beginning in my module 1 class, we spend the whole time, we just actually have quite a hilarious, riotous laugh of a time, because the big task is to say whatever crazy shit pops into your head. And as we do that, and as we start to kind of go through that process of honoring the crazy stuff that pops into your head, trusting your gut a little bit, going, fuck it, it doesn't actually matter if I'm wrong here, because we're so worried about being wrong, and that's why we don't trust our gut. We really start to get into what's possible when we listen to that, and when we trust our gut and the cool information that comes, and the trust of self. Because depending on how you want to use your animal communication, if it's just at home by yourself with your own animals, that's great. But if we go back to the first point, that a lot of people are getting amazing information and they're not trusting it, they're not trusting their gut. And certainly if you want to do this work professionally, if you want to combine it with, if you're a dog trainer or an animal therapist or a horse masseuse, or you're doing professional energetic and animal communication work, the trusting of your gut is so, so vital, because it doesn't matter how amazing the information is that you pick up, that gut, the honoring of the gut stuff, that's what will take you to the next level in your animal communication work. So definitely myth busted that it's all about opening the third eye. It is not about opening the third eye. It's much more about connecting through the heart, which you guys I know are already doing. The gut is a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder one to trust, and that's why it's such a hinging point, such a a magical point of leverage for your intuitive abilities. but also to get excited and to feel like that little tingle of excitement in your reproductive brain, because that center of our being is very, very tribal. It's where we connect to, to community, we connect to tribe, we connect to family. And that's another thing that I think a lot of women especially, we tend to be more in our heart and more in our brain. And we are less likely to connect with those lower centers around gut and reproductive brain. And they are sources of amazing wisdom. They're super important to the intuitive process. So I would love to, now I've busted about 4 myths. I'd love to find out if there are any questions that are coming out. We've got about 10 minutes left on the webinar. So I don't know if there's anything, Alexa, that you would like to talk about, but if anyone online wants to throw a question in, if there's anything that you were maybe hoping that I would chat about, or there's any burning questions that you would like answered, now is a great time to throw them in the mix. You're welcome to just type them into the little panel on the side. I don't know if I'm mirror image or not, but there's a little panel on one of these sides when you're doing the webinar. You're so welcome to ask questions. And Alexa, is there anything that you would like me to talk about, especially, maybe in relation to my upcoming visit to Canada? Yay! I'm so excited.
That's awesome. Let's see. Yeah, Laura's coming to Canada again. It's so great because
I just love Canada so much. It's going to be like a regular thing. It's going to be my second home.
Yeah, and also because we just go into withdrawal when we don't see each other. So we got to do that up.
Cook up crazy adventures again.
Totally. And I think, I think it's so great. And I want to just share with everybody that I come from a slightly different kind of situation where Laura really opened up like that myth of, that you have to have a gift or, be special in some way. And I, essentially until 23 had no idea that you could even talk to animals. And after that, it was still a struggle, but I was so fascinated by, what was going on that I did that old fashioned thing of just practicing. And, it took me a long time, and I still, even now, I think there's a myth that I don't know if this would be one, but for me, I know that if you've got it, you've got it. I know there's some days where I am just not feeling connected at all, and just getting no information and just feeling what am I doing? And it's just with anything, you have days where you're super on and
you're on fire and it's all working and
absolutely. And then you have days where you just are getting nothing. And it's just nothing seems to be connecting and you just don't understand. So I think that's really something I like to bring in. And for those people that are lay people that are just really wanting to take this out of the curiosity or to work more with animal communication, out of it just a genuine curiosity about this whole thing, and wow, we can talk to animals and or communicate on a different level. My sort of sharing with you is that it's not, here's a myth, that it's just going to happen overnight.
It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice.
Right? We're developing a new skill set and a new,
totally.
It's for example, being at osteo school right now, I could not for the life of me see how things moved in space. It's my brain just hadn't had to do that for so long that I would just get knotted up. But now I'm it's starting to drop in, oh, now I get it. But it was almost like having to work a muscle out,
I was just going to say, to me, this is exactly like a muscle. And, I think the reason that we as human beings don't have this we don't have, this is not working maybe the way we would like it to, or the way we dream it would, like our Disney princess moments where we're like, oh, the animals will just come to me and it'll be magical and beautiful. It doesn't work that way because we're not using it all the time. And the more we use it, and I think this is, Alexa, where you and I probably have a similar story, is, we're both so blessed that our work created the scenario where we were just dropped into the deep end and we had to swim. So spending time with other people's animals in this amazing space, in this permissive space where, you really can connect and listen. You're not on a schedule around, you've got a 10-minute consult. We spend really genuine time with people and their animals. And for me, that was what began to switch my animal communication abilities back on. I certainly remember being a child that spoke to animals. And then for a long time, that felt like it was like I'd made it up, I went through a period of my life where the magic went away, because you grow up and, I got in trouble a couple of times for doing things with animals and, or saying things that the animals had said to me. And so the magic went away. But even if you didn't have a magical childhood with animals, all it's about exposure and practice. So you can build those muscles. It's like anything. If you go to the gym, you can work it out. And it does take discipline. And I'm so blessed because I spend all day, every day with animals and other people's animals. So I get a lot of fitness training around that. But it's available to you guys too if you just take the time and practice. And you're going to go on those ebbs and flows, you're going to have times where you're progressing and a lot is happening and you're learning heaps. And then other times where, it really just feels like you're not getting it. And actually, that's something I want to talk about in the next webinar as well, around turbocharging your superpowers with animal communication, because a lot of the time, if you feel like you're stuck in that place of not getting it, there's a really specific reason why. And we will definitely talk about that in the next webinar. So that's something that we'll do. I wanted to, sorry, Alexa, I don't want to cut you off.
No, there is some questions though, honey.
Exactly. That's where I'm at as well. So Andrea has just written, do I prefer to work in, or consult with someone in person where possible, or the animals remotely, and what are the benefits of both? So that's a great question, Andrea. Thank you so much. I actually am cool either way. I don't have a particular preference. Obviously, I love being with animals, and a lot of my skill set was developed through being with animals, but some have advantages and some have disadvantages. And I'm going through this process at the moment with my animal translator group, where I'm encouraging them to try different ways. You might have a preference as you're learning. You may have a preference. And one of the things we sometimes struggle with as humans is when the animals are there, it can be distracting. We want the animal to be with us and cuddling us and doing what we, giving us all the right signs that we are so in tune and we're so connected. And sometimes that doesn't happen. So that can be a distraction. However, you also get instant real-time feedback where the animal's behavior in response to the conversations that you're having and the information you're picking up and what you're translating can be valuable to you and can be validation. So that is awesome. At other times, like when you're working from a photograph, it can be really nice because there is a lessening of pressure around the animal being near and with you. And especially, say, if you're working with a dog with aggression issues, you are going to feel much safer, much calmer, much more neutral. You're going to have much more of your brain power to listen to that animal if they're not actually in the room with you. So, and also in those cases, often when the animal is fearful, it can be more respectful for the animal to have the privacy and the space to not necessarily have a strange person. You think about those cats. We all know someone that's got a cat that likes to hide under the bed when people come over and nobody ever sees them because they're so afraid. A cat like that would probably be much more open to a conversation via distance and a photograph than it would if you're kind of crouched down trying to peer under the bed, trying to see what the cat is doing while you're talking to it. So I actually don't have a preference. I really enjoy working both ways, but depending on you as you're learning, you might find that you have a preference or a way that makes you feel more comfortable as you are learning the process. And that would be my advice to you, is as you're learning, to do what seems to work best for you, because a huge part of learning is building your confidence so that you can learn to trust your gut. Do what you need to do to feel confident and get the validation that you need. So I'm hoping that answers your question, Andrea. And I'm just going to go now. We've got another. Thanks so much, Andrea. Beautiful. I've got Hannah's asked a question as well, and there are no silly questions. Can you actually have a conversation, or do you only receive pictures, words, and ideas? And is it true that sometimes animals don't want to communicate? So I'll answer both of those questions for you, Andrea. Yes, it is absolutely possible to have a conversation. What I find that this depends on a little bit is individual animals and their conversational skills. So animals as individuals are the same as we are. Some of them are wonderful conversationalists, and others are just not that interested in conversation. They're like, one word answer and, can you just leave me to have my beer and watch the news kind of thing. So their personality will play a big role in this. And I have some animals of mine that I have very deep back and forth conversations with, and some of my clients are like that, and the information comes quite conversationally. And other times, and I've got Buzz behind me here at the moment, who is a wonderful conversationalist. He loves to chat about stuff. And then other animals prefer to really only communicate when there's a purpose, and they like their downtime. So they are like, I'll have a conversation with you, or I'll give you the answers that you require. I'll communicate this message, but then after that, can you just leave me alone? I like my downtime. I don't like to have wordy, ongoing back and forth. That's not my style. That's sometimes I notice that is related to like past life resonances. So Buzz, for example, behind me here, hey Buzzy, Buzz has been a dog in lots of his other lifetimes, so he's been really quite used to being part of the family and like being in the house. He would love to come in the house now. He loves to have time away from the other horses and to hang around in the backyard and just be part of what I'm doing, and we'll often have conversations while he's doing that. But he's not entirely a horsey horse, whereas some of my horses are quite horsey horses. And Bridget, my little mare, has kind of shown me that she's been an elephant in the past. So she really likes her alone time. She loves to be with her herd. She loves her boys in the herd, and she loves spending time with them. And she's a little bit wilder. She doesn't always want to have these ongoing conversations. She likes her downtime. So depending on the individual animal, Hannah, I'll notice that there is like a different kind of naturalness or desire for conversation. And it is true that sometimes animals don't want to communicate. Absolutely. I find that as time is going by in my animal communication career, that is happening less and less. Most of the time now, if I sit to talk with an animal, or an animal pops into my space, so certainly if a client wants to connect with me around an animal, there's a need there for the communication, and very rarely now does an animal not want to talk. They may not want to talk about the same thing that the human wants to talk about, but if there's a need there, they will have those conversations. Sometimes when an animal doesn't want to communicate, it can be a reflection of our own nervousness or anxiety around, like, am I doing this right? Am I in the right zone? Like, I sometimes question, is the block coming from us? Is it a mirror of us when we are worried about am I going to receive information? But there are other times as well where an animal initially will not want to talk, and that may be highly relevant for what's going on. So I've had times where I've gone to, especially early in my animal communication work, I went to talk with an animal, and actually the animal turned around and walked away and was like, I don't want to talk. And what I discovered later, yeah, Bridget, what I discovered later was that was relevant because the conversation that the human wanted to have, the owner wanted to have, was not being entirely respectful of initially listening to what the animal wanted to talk about, or there wasn't quite the rapport and trust required to have the conversation that was needed. So I guess it's like the equivalent of, like, sometimes we've got like deep stuff in us, deep emotional stuff in us, like big, heavy stuff that we need to talk about, but we're not going to have that conversation with just somebody we're in line with at the supermarket. It needs to be with somebody where there's like a bit of trust established. So that's, you know, the permission side of it. And again, that's something I want to talk about a little bit more in the next webinar, Hannah, if you're able to jump online for that one. Sometimes when there's no permission or the permission is withdrawn, there is a reason for that. And it's not actually the end of the conversation, it's the beginning of the conversation. So that's what I'm finding now a lot of the time with the animals when they don't want to talk. But it is a thing that can happen. And in my animal communication cycle, provisions are made for that, so that when that happens, that we can really honor it and use it as a point to like move forward from. So either we need to go back and adjust our own energy to make sure we're not expecting too much, or we're not projecting too much, or it's something that's relevant because we're maybe asking the wrong question, or something needs to happen. You know, if I go back to Andrea's question about sometimes an animal doesn't want to talk because we are too in their space. They need more space from us to feel safe and comfortable to talk. And all of us need to feel safe and comfortable in order to have a conversation, especially to talk about anything that's in any way real and valuable. You know, like, we're not just talking about the weather. We need a certain comfort zone. So I'm hoping that kind of sheds a couple of light, a bit of light on that part of it for you, Hannah, around the, and when animals don't want to communicate. I think sometimes it's relevant because we're not asking the right questions or having the right conversation, or there's something we as human beings need to do to release the pressure, to take the pressure away, so that the conversation that can be had can be really real and meaningful, and that they can feel safe and comfortable to do that. Groovy. Anything else you can think about, Alexa, that we need to, it's my pleasure, Hannah, absolutely such a pleasure. I want to be like respectful of people's time, I guess, a little bit. So I should maybe mention, if people want to find out more information about what I do, or want to learn more about animal communication, where they can go. So if you're in Australia and you want to find out what's going on, you can go to my website, which is One Spirit. It's the word one, not the number one. So onespirit.com.au. And Alexa is very graciously hosting me again on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, in July, start of July, right?
Yeah, right at the beginning of July. Yeah,
right at the beginning of July. Yeah. I'm going to be teaching my Module 1 animal communication class this time I head over, and I'm also going to be rolling out my Module 2 class, which is really exciting because I've just taught that for the first time over here, and it really gets into some of the like energetic decoding processes that I use to get messages from the animals. Bradley is sending a message right now about how hungry he is, that he must be released. They've got big juicy hay rolls in the paddock, so I've been trying to limit them on that, but he is absolutely right now going, I will eat the fence if you don't let me out there now. So it's time.
Yes.
Alexa, if they jump, is your website alexalinton.com, is that correct?
Yes, but I don't have any info on the course yet. So
okay, it'll be up there shortly by, in the next couple of days. And if you've been online or registered for this website, we can send you the links for that. We'll also send you the link to the replay if you want to watch it again. So we'll get that up, and means you can kind of review it if you'd like to.
Perfect.
Groovy.
Yay.
All right. Well,
thank you, Lenny. It's so great. So much great information as always.
My pleasure. My total pleasure. Thank you for braving the little bit of background noise, the wind and the occasional plane flying overhead, and Bradley's water music in the background, because it's just been so nice to be outside with the animals today rather than be in an office. It's just too magnificent a day here to be in the office. So I want to thank you guys, everyone, for jumping online, for your time today. Please, if you're not our kind of on our page on Facebook, check it out. It's One Spirit Animal Therapies on Facebook. And if you have any questions that come up even after this webinar, please shoot them through, because hopefully we can address them in the webinar next week. So you'll see that there's an event online for that if you haven't already registered for it. And have a beautiful evening if you're in Canada, and enjoy this magnificent day if you're over the other side of the world where the day is just beginning.
Awesome.
Thanks, Alexa. Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks for jumping online with me today.
Anytime is great, as
Groovy.
always.
Yay. Yay. All right, everybody. Have an awesome rest of what remains of the day. And remember that you don't need magical superpowers to talk to animals. They are within you. You just need to begin to practice them and trust your gut a little bit about them, and get the information whichever way it comes. So I have great faith that even just that little bit of knowing will open up the lines of communication between you and your pets a bit more clearly, which should be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, I'm gonna stop this so that we can all get on and go do things in the real world again, not in the magical online world. Thanks for joining us.